Hello, and welcome to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast, where we explore company culture in the fascinating world of manufacturing. I'm your host, Jim Mayer, and I hope you are ready to meet a powerhouse in the manufacturing field. Our guest today is Meaghan Ziemba, a technical writer, brand storyteller, and marketer for industrial manufacturers who's on a mission to empower women in the sector. With a BA and MA in professional and technical writing from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Meaghan has been writing for manufacturing since 2008, but she's not just a wordsmith. She's also the host of Mavens of Manufacturing, a video broadcast series that celebrates the stories and achievements of women in the field. Through Mavens, Meaghan aims to attract a younger generation to join manufacturing and engineering career pathways and help close the skills and gender gaps in the industry. As a proud mother of three, Meaghan knows how to juggle priorities, and she brings that same energy and focus to her work in manufacturing. Whether she's cooking up a storm, crushing her CrossFit workouts, or savoring a great cup of coffee or glass of whiskey, Meaghan is all about embracing challenges and pushing boundaries. Join us for an exciting conversation with Meaghan as we explore the world of women in manufacturing and how we can create more inclusive cultures that empower everyone to thrive. So sit back, relax, and join us for this exciting episode of the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. Hey, Meaghan, how are you doing today? Thank you so much for joining.
I'm great, Jim. Thank you for having me.
This is something that I have been mentally preparing for since we talked about having you on. I fanboyed a little bit about having you on, had to mentally prepare. So I really appreciate you being on today. This is a very special interview for me. I'm so excited to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited too, and thank you. I don't know about all the mental preparation. I'm just another human being, so I'm excited to have this conversation, and hopefully we get some laughs in there as well too, because I'm all about having fun and laughing at myself. So
Perfect.
Hopefully that happens.
Yeah, we're gonna get along great. So before we jump into some of these questions, Meaghan, you're a fan of whiskey. What kind of whiskey? Are you blended, a Scotch? What's your whiskey of choice?
Yeah, so I kind of like the whiskeys that have a bit of bite to them, which I really didn't get introduced to that until I met my ex-husband.
Okay.
So I really like Woodford Reserve, and I like Buffalo Trace as well too.
Okay.
I used to be a big, I still am. It's not that I used to be. I used to drink Jameson all the time. But yeah, I like Buffalo Trace and Woodford Reserve. I know there's more expensive whiskeys out there, but I'm on a budget, so I can't drink those as often. So yeah, my go-tos are definitely Buffalo Trace and Woodford.
I feel you. The only time I seem to have good whiskey in the house is when I'm gifted those for birthdays and Christmas, right?
Yeah. Well, and the thing is I mean, I have a lot of good friends, like they're amazing, and I wouldn't trade them in for the world, but they're cheap friends as well too. So they're not buying me any expensive gifts.
All right, I got it. I just got this year from one of the longest friends that I have, a Nick Offerman Lagavulin Scotch. And it is the peatiest Scotch that I have. It's like drinking soil. It's so peaty. So I can only have one glass every so often. So it will last me a while. So when you're out for MFG at the end of April, maybe we can get together and we can have a little whiskey sampling, if you will.
Yeah, I would love to do that. That I don't know if I would drink something that reminds me of soil though, so I might have to
we'll
pass
come
on
up with
that one.
something. Yeah, we'll come up with
Yeah.
something else. Maybe we can both bring something that is more of the milder
Yeah.
variety. I'm not trying to pawn off the soil whiskey to you.
I mean, I'll try anything once, but that description did not get me excited for trying that particular one. But
yeah, there you go. I do what I can. Sorry, Nick Offerman. He will not be sponsoring this show, this
yeah.
episode moving forward, I think.
But if you want to send me a free sample just to prove me wrong, I'm open to that as well.
Hey, Nick Offerman, we're looking at you, buddy. We're looking at
Right.
you. If you're listening, send us whiskey. All right, so let's jump into some of these questions. The first one I have for you, Meaghan, is around Mavens of Manufacturing. Tell us about Mavens. What inspired you to focus on women in the manufacturing sector? How did it come into fruition for you?
Yeah, so as you mentioned in your excellent intro of me, that I'm very grateful for, that was a great intro.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. I've been writing for the sector since 2008. My first job out of college was actually for a trade publication called Product Design and Development. And I met a lot of different people, including women. So while it was a little awkward at first to go to trade shows and be one of maybe 4 or 5 at the time,
Yeah.
it was great to connect with those women that weren't hired as booth babes or booth bunnies,
Yeah.
and really get an understanding of how they started in the sector and some of the things that they were doing. Because I just thought it was cool that, you know, these women stuck through some of the hard challenges they had to face as women in a male dominated industry, and they still were smiling, and they still highly enjoyed what they had to do and the changes that they were making in the world. So fast forward to a few years ago, right before the pandemic hit, I had a conversation with my ex-husband because we just had our son Ronan, and I have a daughter that's 19, and then I have 2 boys, 5 and 4 now.
Wow.
But we just had our youngest Ronan, and I was kind of tired of working in a corporate environment where I had to be where they wanted me to be at certain times. And I
Yeah.
really wanted to just be able to have the freedom of, you know, making my own hours, picking my own clients. And the great thing about being a tech writer is you can find freelance work pretty easily if you look in the right places.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily have to be in one place all the time. Like if you have a laptop, you can work on the beach if that's your preference.
That
And
sounds nice.
yeah, so I don't have a beach near me. I'm in the Midwest, so it's very jealous of people that do live by beaches.
You have
Um,
lakes.
yeah, but it's not warm all the time, and I'm not trying to sit by a lake when it's cold. But uh, you know, I just said, you know, I would like to spend more time with our kids, because when I had my daughter, I missed out on a lot because I was a single mom and I was working full time and going to school full time. So there was a lot of moments in her life that I missed because of that sacrifice I made. So I was just trying to be an overall better parent, better working mom.
Yep.
And my ex was like, yeah, you know, you should do that. Well, then the pandemic hit, and then he lost his job. So I was like, I will look for another full-time job, and a photochemical etching company in Chicago hired me on as a pandemic hire. So I did not make it into the office until like 3 months or 4 months later, whenever they started opening up things again. So I didn't know any of my coworkers right off the bat. But it was around that same time where I was like, you know, I'm seeing all these conversations on LinkedIn because people started creating more content on LinkedIn to kind of maintain their sanity and keep connected during
Yeah.
that time of isolation. They were talking about some major issues in the sector, but it was all guys. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to reach out to them, suggest the women that I know, and then hopefully they'll start inviting some of those women to join the conversation. Because, men and women think differently. And I think women have an interesting perspective on some of the issues that are going on in the sector. So
Mm-hmm.
I would offer my suggestions, and the response was, yeah, we'll reach out to them. And then they never did. So I said, screw it. I'm going to start my own thing. And I was out to dinner with a mentor of mine. We were actually at a bougie taco place. And we were drinking whiskey and eating tacos. And we were talking about our fears. And I was like, I went skydiving because I'm deathly afraid of heights. And he's like, interesting. And he's like, so what's your fear with starting this whole Mavens thing? Because I did my pitch with him, and he thought it was really interesting. And I was like, I don't know, I'm just not prepared for it. I don't have a website or anything up for it. And I'm just not ready for it. And he goes, well, you don't need to be ready. All of that stuff is really easy, and I can teach you how to do it. He's like, why don't you do this? Make an announcement on LinkedIn, see if there's any interest, and then if there is, come back and we'll have a conversation. So I went on LinkedIn and I said, hey, I have this, I don't remember verbatim what I said, but
Sure.
basically saying, hey, I have this idea, really interested in talking to women in the sector. Feel free to reach out to me. And I actually booked shows out until April of that year
That's
for
awesome.
Mavens of Manufacturing. Yeah. So it was just completely mind blowing. So I went back to my mentor and I was like, yeah, you need to help me now because I have shows booked out until April and I don't know what to do. So he helped me with all the basic stuff. And one of the best pieces of advice that he gave me was like, your first episode's going to suck. Like there's going to be technical things that go wrong. You're going to stutter, you're going to fumble over your words. He's like, but as long as you keep progressing forward in 1% intervals, he's like, you're never going to fail. So I always aim to be 1% better than what I am the day before.
I love
And
it.
yeah, it's been going pretty well. But the other reason why I wanted to start it though too is my daughter, who's in college now, she's studying to be a surgical nurse. And the reason being is because Grey's Anatomy is her favorite show.
Ah,
And she really liked that show, and thought it was cool how people who get sick or hurt, there's technology and medicine out there available for us to really help them and keep them alive.
mm-hmm.
And when I was talking to her and her friends, I noticed that all of them were talking about 4-year education and going to universities and getting into some of these medical fields. And uh, some wanted to be teachers, others wanted to be lawyers. No one really talked about being an engineer or a manufacturer.
Mm.
And when I asked them why, they really didn't know what that meant. And some of them had the misconception that, oh, that's not a stable place to get a career in. And it's dirty, dark, and dangerous. And who wants to work on a shop floor with oily tools? And who wants to cut this and that? Like, they just didn't really know what existed within the sector.
Sure.
So I wanted to have a platform for women to come and share their stories, explain their journey, and then talk about the skill sets they had to kind of educate the next generations of what engineering and manufacturing is. Because I feel like we're not doing a great job of that still.
Yeah.
And the reason why I picked Mavens as the title is I didn't want to be another women organization or platform. I wanted to really focus on the skill sets that these women brought to the table.
I love it.
So that's why I decided to wordplay Mavens, because a lot of people who aren't familiar with the English language, I saw a common trend where they automatically linked it to a female.
Mm.
So people started thinking, oh, well, Maven is a female, and it actually isn't. It's an expert or a connoisseur of something. But because it sounds feminine, I think some people just automatically connect it to a woman. And it's actually a gender neutral word in the English language. So only a few people caught on to my tricky wordplay, and I appreciated that. But yeah, I wanted to kind of step away from the same women groups that I was seeing and just really focus on the skill sets that we were bringing to the table. And it has unexpectedly just flourished. And when I hear people compliment me, I'm a little taken back because, again, this was something I wanted to create for the people that I knew doing amazing things. And I tend to just tell people, I'm just a storyteller, I'm just a writer, and I'm just using my skill set to really amplify the voices of others that are actually doing things in the sector. And I've gotten yelled at already a couple times from my friends for doing that. But yeah, so that's pretty much the gist of how Maven started. And I'm really thankful because I've met so many interesting people, and I've talked to so many students as well too, and so many people have come and helped me in certain areas that I'm not so good at. Like, I am not a business person by any means. And I have just had several people come up and say, hey, this is something you should think about. And if you need help, let me know and I'll provide you resources. And usually that's coaching that you would have to pay for.
Sure.
And none of these people have charged me. So I'm eternally grateful for their guidance and their advice and their support, because without it, Mavens wouldn't be where it's at today.
Wow. That's a really neat story. And because I'm not the most intelligent of people when it comes to the language that I speak every day, I had no idea about mavens and the root of that word. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like it. And then the other thing is too is like, there's a lot of talk about the old white men in the sector,
Right.
and I get it, but we still need the old white men in the sector. And I wanted to create a name that didn't isolate anybody from the conversation. And we all can be mavens. Even the guys that have come before us, they can be mavens as well too. So yes, there is a focus on women for my podcast, but I wanted it to be something that includes everyone, because without some of the men in the sector, I wouldn't be where I'm today, because a lot of my mentors have been men, and I'm eternally grateful for them as well too, because they have given me some really good advice on, yeah, there's going to be jerks out there, and you just got to kind of shrug off what they say,
Yeah.
because this sector needs you, and it needs your thought process and your critical thinking, and because without it, we're not going to progress forward. So I'm trying to change that narrative a little bit as well too, and just get everybody involved, because we need to pull together. As the old saying goes, it takes a village, and this is definitely going to take all of us to close the skills gap.
You're not wrong there. That's yeah, it's an ongoing issue, and it's a multifaceted issue, that the skills gap. Um, I, for I don't know, 15 years or so, I've heard about the skills gap, maybe longer.
Hmm.
I've been in the industry for about 20 years, but 15 or 17 years, we've been talking about the skills gap, but we
Hmm.
seem to still be approaching the skills gap from the same standpoint. Um,
Hmm.
and that's where this podcast was born, right? Is I love the workforce development efforts with students, right? We have to get young people interested and change the perceptions of parents, but we also
Yeah.
have to build cultures internally within the companies that are out there that are welcoming to these young people. Because if we
Yeah.
don't change, and that's where this podcast was born, was, hey, let's talk culture. Let's talk about some of the things that Nicole Walters and Steve Tomasi and some of these other people are doing in the industry to create places that young people want to go work.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's we've got to do this together. And I love that answer.
Thank you.
So, what as a woman in this industry, and you talk about the booth bunnies and those people who historically were part of the IMTSs and other trade shows.
Mm-hmm.
In 2023, what are some of those challenges that women face in the manufacturing industry, and how can companies that are working to be better overcome them?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Some of the challenges that existed, 10, 15, 20 years ago are still there. They
Okay.
haven't gone
Yeah.
completely away. I do see companies wanting to make efforts in overcoming those challenges. And, it's not going to take a day. It's slowly progressing. I would love to see it progress a little quicker. But again, it's a culture change, right? Because it's
Hmm.
still pretty much male dominated. It's been like that for years and years. And you got to change the culture for actual change to happen. But there's a few things. Some companies, didn't have female restrooms. Um, there's
Right.
also issues with, some of the stuff that's going on in our society today on how people identify as themselves.
Hmm.
Um, like I heard one story where a company included transgender restrooms in their facility, and it made a difference to who was applying for their jobs.
Wow.
So it's things like that that people don't think of, or they're uncomfortable to talk about it. Um, so it's just really understanding what matters to not the current not just the current generations, but also the next generations as well too, and having those conversations that might be a little uncomfortable. The other thing is support, whether that's internal support. So if you really want to change your culture, it has to start at the top. It has to start with leadership. And
Hmm.
if you set up boundaries and expectations, then you need to follow through with that. So sexual harassment is very well still much prevalent.
Yeah.
And when it gets reported, something has to happen. Because if nothing happens, then you're just all talk and you're not walking the walk, basically.
Yeah.
So that's still much prevalent. And the other thing is too is just promotion of women. So there was a stat that I read the other day where it said 1 in 4 people within manufacturing is a woman leader. But I was just reading a report too where a lot of companies are losing the women leadership that they have because they're not taking consideration what's important to the women leaders,
Uh,
and so they're leaving and trying to go somewhere else uh, to feel like what they care about matters to the companies that they're working for. And what that is doing is actually making the next generation of women not want to work at those companies either. So
sure.
they're basically following suit. So there's a thing called the broken rung. um, I don't know if it's a theory, but basically that first step of promotion is very limited with women.
Mm.
So if they can't break through that first step of promotion, it's very hard for them to advance their careers in certain companies that don't promote women within. So but the other thing is too is because there's a low percentage of us, sometimes it's hard to promote women within because there's just not enough to promote. So
Sure.
we really got to change the way of how we're talking about these positions and how we're actually bringing awareness too. Because I remember being in high school, the way that I tested in English was what they focused on,
Hmm.
and they never like encouraged me to pursue anything in STEM because I
Right.
sucked at math and science. So, I mean, there's a lot of different challenges at different levels, and we really got to be strategic about it and figure out how we're going to approach those challenges. Some companies are doing a really great job where they're offering tuition for advanced uh, improvement or continuous learning.
Hmm.
They're also offering training and certification with their current employees so that they can upskill their current employees.
Sure.
They're offering leadership programs as well too for women who might have a hard time finding their voice and being confident in their skill set.
Hmm.
And they're also joining organizations like Women in Manufacturing, so that they can connect with other women in the sector and have some commonalities there.
Great
So they're paying,
organization.
yeah, so they're paying for their membership because WIM offers corporate memberships too. So if you get a corporate membership, basically anyone in your company can go to their events and sign up for some of their uh, state events too, because they have different chapters within different states, and I think they just expanded internationally too. Like they have
Yeah.
a few chapters in other countries. So it's just, I mean, doing things like that where you're helping them along their career pathway, is, you know, makes a big difference. Because if women don't feel supported, um, they're going to leave and they're going to go somewhere else where they feel
Yeah.
supported. And if they don't see themselves in a company, then more than likely they're going to ignore that company and go somewhere else. So it does truly start from leadership. You have to change the culture within your organization to make women feel comfortable to even apply there.
Hmm.
Some have even gone as far as changing the way they write their job ads so that the language they're using is more inclusive as well too, and not so masculine sounding.
Yeah.
Because what is that stat? It's one of my favorite stats because I didn't know this, but women tend to only apply for jobs they feel 100% qualified for. Whereas
Yes.
men, if they feel 60% sure of it, they'll apply for it, which I thought was really interesting. So
Yeah.
they're trying to just adapt their job ads to be all inclusive instead of just focusing on one gender, which, no one really thinks about that, right?
Right. But
It,
representation matters. I mean,
yeah,
that's you've got to have, whether it's genders or race or whatever the case, you've got to have that representation to attract that next level of workforce, right?
yeah,
Um, it, I still run into companies that don't have maternity leave policies. I mean, how
hmm,
can we as an industry start to get women involved in manufacturing if the most cherished moment of life and creation of life isn't people aren't given the opportunity to bond with their children, et cetera, et cetera. How can
yeah.
manufacturing adapt to those kinds of needs?
Yeah, so there are a couple companies that are actually offering full pay for maternity leave. They're not
Okay.
offering it as like a disability, where
Hmm.
sometimes that's how it's set up.
Right.
The other thing is too is a lot of companies are trying to create spaces for any mother that has to pump for if they're breastfeeding their children.
Yeah.
I noticed when I've worked at a couple companies, that's a huge challenge for some of the older companies that have been around hundreds of years. They just never had to consider that because most of their workforce was men.
Right.
And then you get working moms coming in and they need to pump and they have no private place to pump. I've met a couple moms who had to go out to their car to
Oh,
do that.
yeah.
And they were just like, you got to do what you got to do. And so I see a lot of companies changing that. The other thing is too is offering the same amount of paternity leave
Yep.
as maternity leave so that dads can also have that bonding moment with their infants. And that's something that attracts women as well too, because it shows that you really care about being an inclusive company and having equity as a priority and equality as a priority, and they're more
Absolutely.
apt to work with companies that consider everybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know that there's other company. I just talked to a company who they actually have a child daycare set up in their facility.
Oh, that's awesome.
And what they do is they have a partnership with the schools so that kids can get picked up. Moms can bring their kids to the facility. Buses can pick the kids up from the manufacturing facility, bring them to school. And then when school's done, the buses will bring them back to the manufacturing facility so that when moms are done with work, they can just get their kids from the daycare and then leave and go home.
That's
So
genius.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. So
That's genius. And as we get into summer, right, and parents are looking for summer camps, that's another, huge moment of time. I would hope that companies start looking at partnering with summer camps and or offering
yeah,
discounts to summer camps, because what are people supposed to do with their kids all day when they're going to work?
yeah, exactly. And that's like a challenge that I've always had with having 3 kids at home.
Yeah,
And that was one of the main reasons why I always wanted to do remote work, because then I could pick my own hours. And I think the pandemic kind of opened up our eyes to the remote possibility. Um,
hmm,
because at first, some companies were like, no, you have to be here every day, 9 to 5. There's
yeah,
no flexibility. And then the pandemic hit, and everybody's like, well, no, we can survive having a flex schedule of some type. There's some companies too that will work with parents, and they can either start earlier in the day or start later in the day. As long as
sure.
they're getting their time in, it's allowing them to have a schedule that fits with the school schedule of their kids so that they can drop them off and pick them up.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good idea as well too.
And you brought up the pandemic, and COVID impacted the manufacturing sector in so many different ways. But one of the
Hmm.
stats that I saw, I think it was at the Web Summit last fall, was the number of uh, the, the number of women that the pandemic affected as far as their ability to go to work, right? Because
Hmm.
uh, typically, and the amount of women that the workforce lost in general. How do you think manufacturing can recoup some of that loss, and really start to retarget people who left, and women who left the industry? Can we start to build those numbers back up?
I think so. But again, it's about having conversations with those individuals and setting up expectations and actually following through with what you say. There's a shift going on where, you have to start treating people like humans. You can't just keep treating them like
Yeah.
numbers.
Yep.
They have lives, and they're splitting their time to help companies make a profit.
Mhm.
So, we spend 8 hours a day at work a lot of times, and that's a lot of time away from family. Um, so I think we just need to have conversations and set expectations and actually follow through with what has been agreed upon.
Mhm.
And then, the other thing is career advancement. Like, there's a ton of women out there that want to advance in their careers. They want to be in leadership positions.
Mhm.
Um, but if they don't feel supported and they're entering in a room where when they start talking, they're either ignored or talked over, or their ideas are given credit to someone else for, because that does happen still to this day,
Yep.
then they're not going to feel appreciated, and they're not going to be afraid to leave, because right now there's a ton of places looking for good employees.
Yep.
So they have options available and they know that. And it's becoming apparent that um, it's not going to be a hard thing anymore to find a good paying job, because so
Yeah.
many people are hiring. So employers really need to listen to their employees and see if there's a way they can work with them,
Mhm.
because again, when you're empowering your employees to be the best they can be, they're actually more productive, which is better for your bottom line, and
Absolutely.
they're more creative as well too, because empowering them gives them the sense that you trust them, so they're more willing to take risks in certain ways, but also take accountability for when they fail
Mhm.
and learn from those failures and move forward. So empowerment is very important for a company's success. And you have to look at different ways on how you can empower your employees, and that extra training and providing flex schedules and working with them is really important in instilling that empowerment into
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes, that's the most true statement I've heard on this podcast in a while. So Meaghan, let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about technology that's impacting the manufacturing industry. What opportunities do you see for young people as we're working to close the skills, the gender, the opportunity gaps that exist in manufacturing? How is technology going to affect that effort to close those gaps?
Yeah, so I mean, who doesn't like robots? I mean, I love robots, but
Yeah.
also with CNC machining, there's a lot of cool companies creating some fantastic, like I just saw Titans of CNC on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
They just posted a video of machining a skateboard, and they were like jumping off one of the CNC machines and doing skateboard tricks with this skateboard that they
That's
CNC
awesome.
machine. Yeah, it was super cool. And, we have to connect the technology to what kids care about. So, how do you figure out what they care about? Well, you have to have conversations with them. So, I'm hearing a lot of discussions around, we have a workforce problem. Here's what we need to do. And it's all these conversations, and there's really no action behind it. And
Yeah.
that's very frustrating for me because I've had so many conversations with not just high school students, but students who are in community college, and they don't feel like they matter to some companies
Yeah.
because they're not getting the attention that other schools are getting. And it really depends on the economic situation of the school. It seems like where
Yeah.
certain companies pay attention more to schools that have a higher budget than other schools, and that's really unfortunate.
Yep.
So, what can we do on our end of things to kind of change that? And again, I challenge everybody who's listening in on this, just like I challenged my one of my network groups this morning to donate some of your time and go to a school that's in your community. It can be a community college, it can be a middle school, an elementary school, a high school, it can be a university. Just go somewhere and ask the students, ask the kids, what matters to you?
Yeah.
What do you get excited about? What are you interested in? What do you want to be? Okay, you answered that. What does that mean to you? Because normally when you ask that to a kid, they generally say firefighter or policeman or doctor or lawyer. Like they're pretty basic about it.
Yeah.
Um, but as they're going through their school career, I mean, there's a few that know what they want to do and they stick to their plan, but a lot of kids in high school don't really know what they want to do or what they sign up for, what it actually means,
Right.
because they don't have that hands-on experience. So, I definitely think we need to take the technology that we have today, whether it's taking a scaled down cobot from one of like Universal Robots or Fanuc or Kawasaki or um, taking down a scaled down robot, bringing that to a school, and just letting kids play around with it. Show
Yeah.
them how to control it, show them how to program it, or do the same with a additive manufacturing printer or a CNC machine. Bring something to the schools and just let kids mess around with it, ask questions, and then, tie in what the career pathways are
Yeah.
while you're demoing that. Haas is a really good company because they've done a phenomenal job at getting in school. So most kids who are at schools that have the opportunities to work with Haas, when you mention CNC machining, that's the brand that
Yeah.
they most likely bring up because they've actually used it in some of their classes. So we got to do more of that because kids remember the stuff that they're working with, and they generally have an interest in continuing to work with it once they try
Absolutely.
it out and test it out. So I think we need to do a better job with different types of internships as well too. So again, as I mentioned before, it's going to take a village to make all of this happen. It's not going to happen at just one level.
Yeah.
You know, we gotta include everybody that's within these communities, because it's going to take everybody to make it happen.
Well, and it sounds like a lot of what you're saying, and a theme that or a thing that you've said a couple of times, is have conversations. And I
Mhm.
think that's just a really important point to make, is whether it's the employees and you're working on retention or recruiting, or if it's workforce development, you got to find out what they want. We got to stop pigeonholing these humans into providing them solutions that they don't want. Let's talk to them about what they want, whether it's those current employees or the employees of tomorrow. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah. So one example I can provide, a few years ago, I did a virtual manufacturing summit at the high school I graduated from.
Okay.
And I had a lot of my network. There's like 8 members of my network that I invited to do a 20-minute presentation.
Hmm.
Some of them were pre-recorded, but there was one in particular, and I gotta give a shout out to Aaron Prathner, because I think his presentation was one of the favorites among the students.
Awesome.
So he used to work with FedEx, and he showed the facility that he was in where they tested out some of the automation solutions that they were looking to incorporate into the processes at FedEx.
Yeah.
And he sat on one of them while another person controlled it, and it was moving him around. So they thought that was pretty funny.
Wow.
But then the other thing that got the kids who were leaning back, kind of paying attention, not really, in their chairs, was they pulled out a PlayStation controller and started controlling one of the robots. And it's just simple coding. And the kids were like, I have that at my house. And I'm like, yeah, so if you have coding, you can code your controller and control robots with it. And they thought that was the coolest thing ever. So
That's awesome.
they just have to know that there's people interested in talking to them,
Yeah.
and they want to open their doors to their facilities and stuff, because that's where most of the aha moments come from. Kids don't really understand the connection between the products that they're using and manufacturing, because they've
Mhm.
never seen it. But once they enter a manufacturing facility and they can start seeing how things are put together, it strikes a chord with them and it interests them and they want to learn more about it. So we definitely need to do that more as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so we talked a little bit about, young people and
Hmm.
listening to their needs. Um, what right now is the most exciting? I mean, is it the robotics? Is that what's most exciting to the young people, and really what we're going to be able to use to grab their attention? Is it you mentioned robotics, CNCs, additive. What do you think is the technology that is going to be most valuable for them or
Hmm.
valuable for us to grab their attention?
Um, I don't think it's one in particular, honestly. I think it depends on what the kid is interested in. A lot of people like robotics. First Robotics, they have some stats out there where a certain percentage of the kids involved in their program actually continue forward with some sort of STEM career.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what the stats are, but they have them available on their website. So a certain percentage of kids that get involved in that program really like engineering and manufacturing, so they continue on.
Hmm.
Um, I know 3D printing struck a chord with a lot of kids that Andrew Crow worked with or talked to.
Yeah.
And there was one school I went to, and they had a laser cutting machine,
No.
and they thought that was the coolest thing ever. I thought that was cool. They even had it in the school. Like, it was one of the high end ones too. And I was just like, how the heck did you guys afford this machine? But no, they, um, but because automation is like the topic of the hour, because pretty soon
Yeah.
everything's going to be automated, in my opinion. And I know that's probably going to make some people upset. um i think I think, yeah, robotics is probably going to be number one. CNC machining I would rate as number two, because
Okay.
then you're doing the programming.
Yep.
This is just my opinion. This is not like set in stone. I want to make that very clear. You can definitely disagree with me, and I'm more than open to having a discussion about it. Um, but yeah, so robotics, CNC machining, additive manufacturing, and then welding.
Yeah.
Kids are getting excited for, and I really like Barbie the welder and the sculptures, because that's she, and there's another welding sculpture out there, and I can't remember her name for the life of me, and I feel so bad because she does really great job. I want to say it's Jamie.
Okay.
But they're actually attracting a lot of girls' attention in welding,
Yeah.
because some of the stuff they're doing, and I think that's cool. Like,
There's a
that's really
woman
cool.
in Yuma, Arizona, named Shannon Aaronmore. And she has an
Okay.
organization called Weld Like a Girl. And
So cool.
she does some amazing camps and events with young people of all genders, right? But
Yeah.
it started out to get young women involved in welding, and it's just blossomed, and she's in a new facility, and it's great. But yeah, young
That's
people are really gravitating towards the welding. I've heard a lot of young people talk about careers in
yeah.
welding.
It's super cool, and it's in such high demand right now.
Yeah.
And the high school that I graduated from, they just hired a new welding teacher, because their previous one retired. And their new teacher is actually an industrial welder. So he actually had time in the field.
Wow.
He's getting his PhD. Right now, he's working on it. But one of the things he wants to integrate in the program is the Skills USA competition that they do.
Yeah.
So he wants to do that. But what he is also doing, because he is actually a certified welding inspector,
Uh,
he can have these kids test for their welding certification, the
that's awesome.
ASW welding.
Yeah.
So by the time they graduate high school, they'll have their welding certification, and they'll be able to go to certain companies with that certification. And I think starting pay for most of those positions is like $27 an hour,
Yes,
which
ma'am.
is
That's awesome, isn't
phenomenal.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, like I worked at a retail store making $5 an hour, and I'm just like, kidding me?
Yeah,
Like,
high school. What I got paid when I was in high school is dramatically different than what you can
yeah,
make now.
yeah.
But let's talk about instructors, right? In Arizona
Hmm.
here, in other areas that I work with, workforce development organizations, instructors are almost as rare as the young people getting into the industry, right? So, how can we
Hmm.
tackle that problem, Megan? How can we go out and find or get instructors to teach that next generation?
You know, teaching is a calling. I personally think not everybody can be a teacher. It takes a very special type of human being to teach.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's a rarity. They also don't get paid what they're
Hmm.
worth, in my opinion. So I think that needs to change. I've met a couple people who have quit their corporate job, took a massive pay cut, and went to go teach, because they see the need there, and
Hmm.
they just have hearts of gold, and they know that without them doing it, no one else would do it. And
Yeah.
that's, I mentioned to you earlier, Danny Murphy. He's one of those individuals that quit corporate to go
Wow.
teach, and he's doing amazing things, and the kids are very engaged in his classes from the videos that he's showing on LinkedIn. He shared one today where they were working with a conveyor system, and they had to program it, I believe, and this is just me observing the video, to have it stop when the box that they put on it
Mm.
reached the end.
Hmm.
And the girl that was in the video, like, had an unexpected yay come out of her mouth when the box stopped, and it was just really awesome to see the excitement from
That's
both
cool.
the students for accomplishing that task. So we definitely need to think of ways to provide them more of an incentive to teach,
Yeah.
because again, they're not getting paid. The other thing is we need to figure out the whole funding situation, um, because with all of the supply chain issues and the economic issues that we're having here in the United States, some of the teachers, if they don't have the budget to purchase the resources from the school, they have to dip into their own pockets to get it,
Yeah.
and that's taking away from their salary. So, what are some of the ways we can fix that issue? And can companies donate old components that they're not using? Can they donate machines that they're not using anymore? Like, what sort of partnerships can manufacturers develop with the schools in their communities so that everybody wins in the situation? There is a high school near my community where they actually have like it's basically a factory floor setup. So the
Wow.
students are learning different sides of manufacturing, from like design, development, processing, shipping, supply chain, and they're making a component that's fairly easy to make to another manufacturer. Um,
Mhm.
and they're making them in large amounts, and then they get a percentage of sales for that piece, and then all of that goes back into the program that the school has. So it's basically like an internship, I would think. So the kids are getting paid, and then money is going back into the program for the work that they're doing for
That's
one of the companies.
genius.
Yeah. So it's super cool. It's super creative. And I think we can do more of that. Again, though, we have to start working together. And, politics
Yeah.
are politics. And sometimes those prevent things from happening because they set up unnecessary barriers.
Sure.
I am not too familiar with all that stuff, though. So I myself need to get better educated in terms of like the policies for different states. Um, I do know his name is Devin Russell. He's an amazing guy. He's in Elk River, Minnesota. He actually went to but he's uh, I can't remember his company. I'll have to look that up. But he went to his boss and said, "Hey, can I donate a certain amount of my time to go to the high school and help the tech ed teacher and share my experience here,
Cool.
so that can be part of the program?" So every week he tries to donate as much time as he can to help the kids learn what they're learning that week. And they have like CNC machining set up there. They have CAD and CAM programs. They have welding. So he goes in there and he shares his expertise. And then what he's doing is he's trying to get more local manufacturers to set up a rotational
Mm.
volunteer schedule,
Yeah.
because he can't always get there, because if things happen at his company, he has to prioritize that over the volunteer stuff. So he's trying to get other companies involved. So in case he can't make it, another company can be there for 3 or 4 hours out of their day
Yeah.
helping the kids.
Yeah.
So, and then Matt Goosey is another one in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
He set up an SOS program. It's Save Our Schools. And he was able to get um, extra compensation for teachers to actually go train at his facility and do what he's doing in the field. And then they bring that knowledge back to the classrooms, and they're teaching the kids how to CNC machine in an actual real life situation. So then they are
That's awesome.
familiar with what his company is doing and producing. So when they graduate, if they want to continue on with his company, they can do that. And then the tech ed teachers aren't getting stuck with like stupid tasks like bus duty. Like
Yeah.
they're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they're actually getting upskilled as well too. So
That's neat. So it's
yeah,
kind of an externship almost.
yeah,
That's
yep.
great. And Matt, I'm glad you brought him up. He's going to be a guest on the show in a couple of weeks, so I'll make sure I took a note to talk to him about that. That's awesome.
He's cool. I like him a lot. He's one of those um individuals that is actually putting his boots to the ground, and he saw a problem and he's like, I'm going to help solve this problem. So he goes out and advocates for manufacturing in a huge way. And I appreciate that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So instructors are only one side of the problem, right? We all know that getting young people interested in these careers. How do we solve the parent perception problem, Meaghan? And I know that's almost tongue in cheek, because if you knew the answer, we'd be solving that, right? But in your eyes, how do we solve this perception problem? Now that I'm 44, now that people who are my age have the kids that are starting to look at those career pathways, and we were, one of the last generations to have shop class, but also one of the first generations to be told that everybody needs to go to a 4-year school, and we've perpetuated that thought process. And in my high school, I've said a couple of times on the show, my guidance counselor didn't even talk to me about a skilled trade. My favorite classes were shop classes. That's where I excelled. And I talked to my dad, who was an educator, about this before, and he said, "Oh, we always knew that you should go into something in a trade, but that was something that we didn't talk about in school." And so, how do we change that perception of people my age, and get them to be more welcoming of these careers?
Yeah, so we definitely need to upskill the school counselors as well too, and kind of teach them what some of the opportunities are and how you can take different skill sets and apply them to the career pathways, because just because someone is good at something doesn't necessarily mean they want to be part of that
Sure.
thing that they're good at. They might be interested in something else and more passionate about something else.
Yeah.
But with the parents, I mean, again, it's education, it's awareness. So you have to have conversations with them as well too, and invite them into your facilities as well too, so that they can see some of this newer technology and get an understanding of it. I was at an event in McHenry County for the high school that's out there, and one of the women who's part of the manufacturing consortium, that's a
Yeah.
hard word, wow. She was telling me how a young girl came to her table and asked about an underwater robotics program,
Wow.
or working with underwater robots. And the high school she went to had a robotics team, and that's where she learned about it. So when she was asking this woman if they make robots that can go underwater, she got the idea from high school. Well, her mom was kind of like, whatever, like thinking it was some crazy idea. And she didn't know that it actually existed. She just thought her daughter was making things up, and saw something on TV. And she didn't know that there was actual real life applications that have underwater robotics. So when this woman was talking to the mom, she said the mom just perked right up and was like, "Oh my gosh, like this is amazing. I didn't know this stuff existed." So again, we have to have conversations with parents as well too, and re-educate them on what the opportunities are, and provide them with the information on the differences in the money savings that's involved as well too.
Sure.
I can tell you right now, I have my master's degree. I'm in six-figure debt still, and I'm
Yeah.
almost 40, and it's not fun. Like, it's not something I'm proud of. Like, it's crazy. I have some friends who went to community colleges, and they're either a CNC machinist, they're an electrician, or they're a construction person, or they're a welder. They have zero debt, and they are living their best life because that's just the path they took, and they excelled in what they were doing.
Yeah.
Even with like nursing, you can go to a community college into their nursing program, get more hands-on experience up front, and not spend as much time in school as you would a traditional route.
Yep.
And you're making money right away. And I tried telling my daughter to do that, but she's stubborn like me, and she wanted to do the 4-year experience, and that's what she's doing now. I'm not trying to bash 4-year universities. I'm not trying to do that at all. I think there is a place for them.
Mm-hmm.
But for kids who do not like school, and for kids who just want to work,
Yeah.
um, I don't think that's the route they should take. I think they should do more of the hands-on stuff and get experience right away, because they're gonna like it and they're gonna excel at it.
Yeah.
So how do we make that happen for them? Um, and the community that I'm from, they're doing something right now. And I don't think I can share too much information about it, but it's basically letting the students and the parents see the different opportunities that exist within the community. And then the kids can decide, yeah, I like this and this is what I'm interested in. Or no, I don't like this. I want to try something else. So once more information about that comes out, I can definitely share what they're doing, because I think that's going to be a game changer in how we're not just educating kids, but the parents as well, as to what's available in manufacturing.
That's great. Yeah, we one of the schools here in the Phoenix metro area, they had just had a parents' night, and we got to sit in the manufacturing lab and tell them about
Hmm.
careers in manufacturing. And we got local manufacturers involved. We talked about the high school pathway that these students would be on. We talked about what happens after high school, apprenticeship programs. It was really neat, um, and we successfully spoke with three out of however many groups of parents came by. Um,
Hmm.
and that's a small start, but it is small, right?
Right.
Um, one of
And
the, go
who
ahead.
knows, like, you might even convince a parent to change their mind and join the sector,
Exactly.
because I've heard that story too. I heard some women who had a different career in one industry and they didn't like it, and then they joined manufacturing and engineering and fell in love with it, and now they're here to stay. So it's
Yeah.
never too late to start over, and I think we got to keep that in mind as well too. One of the companies here in the community that I grew up in, uh, one of the interesting things I found out about them is they actually have manufacturing signing days. So you know
Cool.
how kids who get recruited by schools for sports,
Yeah.
how they do the signing days? This company does that, but it's for their manufacturing jobs that they take.
That's
So
really cool.
they set it up pretty similar, and they bring people in to cheer these kids on, because they make a whole event out of it. Like, it has an introduction and a welcome uh, session, and then there's a guest speaker, and then they recognize certain people, and they have a photo shoot for the kids actually signing with them, and
That's
then they
cool.
have like their closing remarks. So they're making it a big deal. Like, they're making them feel important when they come in and join their company, which I thought was awesome.
That's I really like that. That's neat. One of
Mhm.
the guests a couple of weeks ago, Steve Tomasi, talked about the 4-year experience, and that being in his eyes one of the biggest barriers to getting kids interested, right?
Mhm.
And you mentioned it with your daughter. Is there a way that we can create an experience around life for kids who are interested in skilled trades? And I'm not just talking manufacturing in general, but any of the skilled trades out there, the people who go to a community college but stay at home. eh, I think that there's a large group of people, young people, who the only reason they go to a 4-year university is to experience that freedom, right? That I'm 18 years old, I'm out of the house, I'm not, reporting to mom and dad every day type of freedom. Is there a way to
Mhm.
create that kind of mindset or experience for them, um, with a community college and apprenticeship experience as well?
That's a really good question, and I've never thought about that before, but I feel like with anything, it's possible. Um, but I would have to think about that and see, like, what we could do to do that, because most kids that do go to community college, it's within their area,
Right.
so they're not really moving out of the house. There's a lot of kids that still live with their parents when they do that option, so yeah, they're not really getting the freedom that they would experience if they go to a college
Right.
that has dorms and everything like that. So maybe that's one possibility, where community colleges set up dorms that kids can just kind of stay at.
I like it.
I don't know if that would be ridiculous or not, because you're only like 5 minutes away from your parents sometimes. But
Hey, then you've
I
got
mean,
somebody to do laundry, right?
right, right, right. I'm just visiting for laundry. That would, as a parent, that would probably annoy me. But no, I think maybe if you could set up like a living community on the community college campus where kids can make the decision of whether or not, but again, that's going to be an extra cost, right? So
It's an
that might
expense. Yeah.
increase, yeah, that might increase tuition or something, which might defeat that whole purpose. But
Right.
I don't know, a lot of kids that I keep calling them kids and I feel bad. But a lot of individuals that I know who have gone to community college, they do like the freedom that they get in terms of working right away.
Sure.
So they feel like, oh, I'm working. It's not necessarily like considered hands-on.
Got it.
They feel like they're, and this is just personal conversations that I've had with some individuals who've gone through community college. Like they really liked that, yeah, we had to go to class, but then I got to work with this patient and I was able to do IVs. I did a blood draw today. Like they got really excited that they did that right away instead of having to wait 2 or 3 years
Sure.
before getting to that point, which is pretty much the process I think my daughter has to go through, where she has to get all of her generals out of the way, take certain classes that deal with her major, and then she'll be able to do clinical stuff.
Yeah.
Um, which I tried explaining to her, you can get there faster if you go to community college. But again, she's stubborn and chose her own path. So that's fine. But yeah, I just think kids get a sense of freedom when they're able to do something with their own hands and see the end result of it.
Yeah.
But again, that's just my personal opinion and what I've observed. There was a girl in the college, or not the college, the high school that I graduated from. She was the only female, and what they were doing is basically building scaled down houses. So it was a construction class, and they had to build a frame, install wiring, electrical stuff. And then they also had a company come in and they were doing this is not the right term for it, but they were doing bricklaying.
Yeah.
And she was the only girl there, and she was awesome because she's like, well, someone has to organize all these guys and make sure they're doing things right and managing. And she was like all for it. She's like, I want to do this, this, and this. So she already knew. And I think that hands-on experience that they were experiencing in the classroom setting really helped her figure out that, yes, this is what I'm passionate about and I want to do this. So
Yeah.
I don't think she cared about that whole
Experience.
freedom.
Got it.
Yeah, because she was figuring it out in the classroom.
Yeah, I get that, and that's a great counterpoint to that, right? And you and I talked before we started the official recording here about the CTE program back east that I had the students on, and that's what I heard from those young women that were on that episode is they were more excited about just doing, right? And the two
Yeah.
women who graduated from this program, they went out and they're now part of the union and they go to work every day and they're crushing it, right? But while they were in high school, until they started that program, their grades were horrible and they were experiencing a lot of anxiety in school and things of that nature. They started the welding program and their grades turned around. They weren't as anxious at school, right? It was a mental health benefit, and it wasn't the experience that they were looking forward to. It was going out and working. So that's a great point. All right, Meaghan, we're nearing the end here. What kind of parting tips, thoughts do you have for the listeners of this episode?
Yeah, so again, I'm going to challenge everyone listening to this episode to connect to someone that's younger than them in the community that they're in, and just, ask them questions and get to know them a little better. Because I feel like we're missing that huge chunk of conversation that involves the next generation. We really need to tune into what matters to them and what they're passionate about. And, some of them have great ideas,
Yeah.
and we don't know that because we're not talking to them. The other thing I would like to challenge companies to do, or communities to do, if there's a trade show within the vicinity of your community, sponsor kids to go to that trade show. I had a bus load of kids come to IMTS from the high school I graduated from. They absolutely loved it. They want to go again in 2024. Some of them even want to go to Fab Tech.
Cool.
And they really don't have the funding within their budget to do that because it wasn't something they really knew about. Not all schools know about these trade show opportunities. So check that out. And then the other thing, if you don't have a robotics team, start one, because kids like robotics. And it's not just teaching them the engineering and manufacturing of the robot itself, it's also teaching them the soft skills. It's teaching them teamwork, collaboration, project management, organization, time management, how to create events for fundraising. It's assigning individuals to uh positions that they enjoy doing. So they have a project manager, they have a marketer, they have the engineers, they have the people building the robots. Start that, because a lot of the kids enjoy doing it, and it opens up their eyes to skills that they might have thought they never had. And it teaches them a lot of soft skills too that are important. And I think we forget those skills sometimes because we're so digitally connected to our phones.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really helps them prep for real life situations when they're done with high school and ready to enter the real world. So those would be my advice,
I love it.
pieces of advice. And then overall, just be a good human. We need more positivity in the world. And I believe in the karma you put out there comes back to you. So just being good human beings.
I love it. I love it. So everybody, that's a wrap for this week's episode. Thank you so much, Meaghan. This was a fantastic episode of the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. It's everything that I had built up internally. So thank you very much for being on. We hope that you enjoyed learning more about Mavens of Manufacturing and Meaghan's insights on how we can build more inclusive cultures in the manufacturing industry and develop the workforce of tomorrow. Meaghan's passion for empowering humans in this sector is truly inspiring, and I hope that her message resonated with everybody listening as well. If you have any questions for Meaghan or comments about the episode, please contact us at manufacturingculturepodcast.com. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Join us again next time for another exciting episode of the Manufacturing Culture Podcast, where we will continue to explore company cultures in the world of manufacturing. Until then, have a great day and keep making things.